as a piece of news or a constellation of tidbits that would cause myself and my partner Evie to take new action. We might go to the store, we might take cash out of the bank, we might do something in regards, this is an official alert. And I'm making this one public because it's, well, A, you get to see what I do, and B, it's just too important. And it relates to this. I think that the they in this story, these are the people who are not interested in a peaceful transfer of power here in the United States and elsewhere. These are the neocons. They are actively trying to provoke a nuclear war at this point in time. And my phone is ringing off the hook over here. The quickening is upon us. Listen, either they succeed or somehow they are stopped before they get their way. So we've had a lot of data up to this point in time that's come through. If you've been tracking this at all, of course, at Peak Prosperity, we're tracking this minute by minute and watching all the things that have happened in the provocations around the Ukraine war and all the ways that Russia is being poked by neocons across the West, principally within the U.S. structure, but also France and the U.K., who seem to be unable to take no for an answer. They want to provoke some sort of larger response from Russia. And failing that, they're going to keep poking. So here's what just I wake up to today. Visegrad here pointing out that British donated Storm Shadow cruise missiles that were fired by the Ukrainian Air Force. Those probably came off of Typhoon jets, so they weren't actually fired by the Ukrainian Air Force. They were fired by UK people. Obviously, they were seen flying over the Kursk region of Russia minutes before striking a joint Russian and North Korean command and control post, killing, they say here, more than 20 high-level officers from both states. I can't confirm that, but this is what it looks like in real time. Here's another one. So what, maybe 300-400 feet off the deck, flying very low and coming in, and they're going to do some damage at some point. So you can understand, of course, if the West, UK, France, Germany, United States, were experiencing cruise missiles coming into their territories to specifically target their high-level military or political leaders. Obviously, those would be overt acts of war. That's exactly how Russia is receiving this. And what we saw was a very, very clear demonstration by Russia. They sent off they're calling it an intermediate range ballistic missile, an IRBM instead of an ICBM. But you can clearly see from the signature here, let's look at this. You don't need to hear this, so I'll turn the volume off on that. You are watching the launch. There's a stage separation that just happened there. You can clearly see, obviously, that's a rocket. And obviously, it's going up into what we would call space. And it creates that classic signature of a high-altitude rocket leaving its little trail of, combustion products coming out the back end. Why is it lit up like that? Probably because it's up high enough that it's seeing the sun, even though you're not seeing it here. And so this missile was sent from Russia to Ukraine with love. And here we can see what it looked like when those things came inbound. I'll play this at the same time. This right here, you're going to see all of a sudden these things come down in groups of 5, it looks like to me. And it's 1, boom, 2, boom, 3, boom, 4, boom, 5. Here they are. 6. Okay, so we have 6 groups of 5 or 6. I'm not clear exactly how many. It's hard to count. I could probably stop it. So that's very consistent with the kind of rocket that we saw. So again, this is Russia sending a signal. Hey, this is the first time, world, that we are using what we would call a hypersonic continental, or, maybe it's not intercontinental. The range of this missile is allegedly between, 2,000 to 4,000 miles. So figure out if you call that intercontinental or not. But clearly this missile could reach very far, very deep into Europe at any old time. And this was supposed to be an experimental missile, but now it's obviously operational. And this is what it looks like when you see things coming in at what appears to be about Mach 10. By appears, I mean the cloud layer is about 2 kilometers up. If you calculate the half-second time between piercing cloud layer and ground, it's about Mach 10. Hard to understand something that's traveling at 2 or even 3 kilometers or 4 kilometers per second. These are unstoppable by any conventional means. So if this is coming at you, it's kind of going to hit you. And for me, this was hard. I had to sleep on it overnight. I have never seen this. I don't think anybody's seen this before. This is what it looks like when you're attacked. There's no time. There's no warning. And by the way, the United States military did not see fit to tell anybody else about that. They were pre-warned by Russia that this missile was going to be launched. Obviously, very easy to detect missiles like this. You wouldn't want that being misinterpreted like a storm shadow coming in to kill some of your generals, even though you have no idea what's on that storm shadow. Is it conventionally tipped, or did somebody put a nuke on there? We are risking nuclear war. I'm not okay with this. Everybody who's involved in this is a traitor to humanity, a traitor to their own countries. I am absolutely gobsmacked that this isn't being talked about and that it's not on the front page of virtually every news cycle that you could possibly have. They used something called the Oreshnik missile, and it means hazel, and it's capable of traveling up to Mach 11. You can see that's supposedly a possible photo, they say. That's what it could look like. Point being, this thing is mobile. You put it's on these big trucks with these launch tubes, drive them around. Very, very hard to take those out with a first strike because you don't know where they are, and very quick to launch those things. They reportedly have 6 warheads, each equipped with 6 submunitions. So I think that's what we saw. Those 6 things coming down in groups 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Very consistent with that. Super difficult to intercept. Okay. Then, carrying on, after Russia does that, I wake up this morning here on the 22nd of November to this news. Krasnodar. Locals reported 2 explosions led to a fire can be seen from afar. Very big explosions in Krasnodar in Russia. Where in Russia? Krasnodar is down over here. Let me get my laser pointer. All right. What I need to point out here is that in this other map, you can see this is all Russian-held territory. This is Crimea, this big head-shaped thing right here. This is the Sea of Azov, controlled entirely by Russia. This is Russia over here. So this is all Russian-controlled. Here again, this is Crimea. This is what got hit. So this is probably not being fired from Ukraine. To fire some sort of a system that could hit here and cause explosions and fires like that in Krasnodar, where did that come from? Launching anywhere here in Ukraine, it has to travel an exceedingly far distance. That would be many hundreds of miles. That's hard to do because here you can see if that's 200 miles from there to there, if that's 100, so that would be from here, it would be about, say, 100, 200, 300 miles to launch that from Ukraine. Probably not launched from there. Probably launched from out here somewhere, which I don't believe Ukraine has the capability to do. So now we have to turn to this, which is being tracked very carefully back at Peak Prosperity in our forums. If you like this kind of information and you want to know what's going on, you definitely have to become a subscriber at Peak Prosperity because we got the signal, folks. We'll tell you what's going on. PNW Defector writing in said that he stepped away from the internet for a bit, missed some serious ominous emergency action. Messages, they're tracking, there's a whole community of people tracking broadcasts out of Barksdale Air Force Base, Red River, over a radio network, going to a B-2 stealth bomber, that's Death 11, and 2 B-52 strategic bombers, which are Doom 11 and Doom 12. Red River calling Death 11. Red River, Death 11, Doom 11, Doom 12. Red River on, that's the frequency, 11-175. Death 11 squawks back. Red River, go for Death 11. Pine Tree, Death 11, Death 11 from Pine Tree. Green light, green light, green light. Death 11 copies, green light. Time now. Doom 11, flight copies, green light. Now, what were they green lighting? We don't know. I did find that a call sign of Red River could also be for United States. There's in Katakak, Greenland. There's a radio base there where they can call out. That could be Red River. Not positive. Pine Tree? Is this Pine Tree? The only Pine Tree I could find would be the headquarters of the 8th Air Force Bomber Command in the UK, located here just a little bit west of London. So is that Pine Tree? Don't know, but Red River and Pine Tree greenlit something yesterday at 2 o'clock Eastern to a B-2 and a pair of B-52 bombers. What did they greenlight? We don't know. By the way, that's Doom 12 right there, and Doom 11 looks suspiciously almost exactly like that. And that right there is Death 11 down there. And cool planes. They kind of look like Peregrine Falcons from the side. So 3 of these planes, strategic bombers for the United States, Doom 12 and 11, are both nuclear capable. So those could have been flying around with who knows what. But we do know that these were in the Middle East, these B-52 bombers. And they arrived on November 3rd, and ostensibly it was around protecting or participating in action against Iran. And it also came with a squadron of F-15E Strike Eagles, refueling tankers, all the rest. We saw pictures of these showing up in Qatar. This is 6 of these U.S. Air Force B-52 bombers, all stored kind of in a Pearl Harbor formation there, all in one spot in Qatar. And at the time, we saw that as they were flying in from BARF 21, there is Barksdale Air Force Base 21, flying in. You see it flies in here, comes in around the south side of Spain, through the canal here, up the Mediterranean, and is going to come all the way in and land over here. But to get over to Krasnodar, which is right here, you just have to cross Turkey. And so if they are stored over here, again, up through Iraq, which is U.S.-controlled airspace, across Turkey, come in here, launch something, and scramble off. Now, here's why this is exceedingly concerning to me at this point in time. Because none of this is being reported in the mainstream news. I could blow all these up, but I don't have to. I checked Bloomberg, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, Yahoo. I checked all sorts of places. There is not a whisper about any of this on the front pages of any of those. New York Times did have something a little bit deeper down, but it was a fluff piece that's pure spin, total bunk. And it said, Russian leader ominously declared that America risks nuclear war as it expands its aid. Yeah, America. Or it's really the neocons, because this is France, this is Germany, this is the UK, this is the US, all doing this and expanding its aid. But everybody knows something to be true, which is it's not possible for Ukrainians to fire the Storm Shadow. They can't do the targeting. They can't input that stuff into the targeting system of that. I doubt they even have the plane mounts to launch these things. So who did then? Obviously, it was the UK. We already know that. So as Ukraine fires U.S. missiles, no, we all know that's bunk, New York Times. And you're just, again, doing the whole world a giant misservice, spinning and lying as you attempt to craft a narrative that for who knows what. But you're risking nuclear war. Come on, New York Times. Can you get with the program here? Can you just finally not do something that's totally stupid and dumb? Please? Because you completely messed up the COVID coverage. You totally dropped the ball on that. Killed a lot of people, did horrible things, did a very, very bad job, and you're doing it again. Remember Judith Miller, aluminum tubes, all that stuff? You lied the nation into war, killed 1 million Iraqis. You're doing it again. And I'm starting to think maybe the New York Times is not actually on the side of peace, justice, the American way, you or me. I'm starting to feel like they're actually on some other, they have a different agenda, and none of it has to do with prosperity or peace or happiness. Just saying. Maybe we should keep that in mind. Russia, for its part, has now threatened to attack a new U.S. base in Poland. It's a missile base with some of their advanced weapons, maybe one of these new Orshnik missiles. We don't know. But here we can see that the foreign ministry spokesperson here said, given the nature and level of threats posed by such Western military facilities, the missile defense base in Poland has long been added to the list of priority targets for potential destruction. If that happens, this triggers automatic Article 5. NATO gets involved and to defend collectively Poland, and then it's game on. This is World War III. This is World War III actually getting kicked off here by people who absolutely said, we don't want a peaceful transfer of power. Remember that? Trump gets elected, and then all of a sudden they're like, oh, let's have a peaceful transfer of power. And then literally the next few days after that election, start dialing this up. And they call it Biden, but it's not Biden, obviously. It has nothing to do with Biden. He's brain damaged. So we have to ask the question, who is this exactly? Fun fact, nobody actually really knows out here in the cheap seats who's actually calling these shots or why. And that's concerning, of course. Now, what we do know is that it's also equally concerning that we have people here in the United States after some really terrible white papers that think that somehow a nuclear war is winnable. That is a strain that they started floating a number of years ago saying, hey, this is winnable. Like, the United States could actually come out ahead in this story. The answer, I think, to that is no. Nobody should actually be exploring that as an option or thinking that maybe that's something we should test, because either coin flip, you had it right or you had it wrong. And if you get it wrong, that's complete annihilation of your entire system, your society, your way of life, and probably 90% of your population. So, hey, let's not. As a point, though, we have to consider that Russia has a dead man switch.
If the USA and UK launch a coordinated missile attack on Russia, destroying all major cities and killing President Putin along with the entire military leadership, Russia has a backup system in place for retaliation, the dead hand. This automated system is designed to respond to such a scenario. Sensors across Russia will collect data on radiation, heat, and seismic activity, confirming a nuclear strike. The system will then await instructions from Moscow's command center. If no response is received, dead hand will assume the leadership has been wiped out. At that point, the system will autonomously launch approximately 4,000 nuclear missiles at the USA and its NATO ally, triggering global devastation. Destruction will be widespread, ensuring that even in death, Russia retaliates. This kind of automated retaliation system ensures that no matter the outcome, the consequences of such an attack would be catastrophic. In the end, the use of nuclear weapons guarantees mutual destruction, a grim reminder of the fragile balance of power.
All right, so that's how it, obviously, you wouldn't want to risk that, of course. This is called mutually assured destruction. Both sides understood that it was in nobody's interest to go down this path because it's your death as well as your foe's death. So you would never do this unless you were completely insane. And if by insane, I mean you're delusional, by which I mean your internal map doesn't comport with reality. And this actually really explains the kinds of people, in particular the Neocon mind virus. Remember, they're the people who are like, oh, we'll go to Iraq, we'll be greeted as liberators with flowers. Didn't happen. We were greeted with IEDs instead. Oh, we'll get rid of Muammar Gaddafi and then Libya will become a much better place. No, it went from one of the most prosperous BRICS nations to an open-air slave market with ISIS selling weapons in the street openly. Everything they touch, everything the neocons touch, turns to dust. They're horrible people. I think they're actually in service of some very, very dark forces that exist out there. Is that a spiritual statement? Is it just, I don't know, it's just speaks to psychological damage at birth that has irrecoverable, I don't know. But everything they touch turns to dust. But first they delude themselves. We'll be greeted as liberators. Hey, a nuclear war is survivable. So what does that sound like in practice? Here it is. This is pure insanity in practice. This just came out a couple of days ago. This is CSIS, Center for Strategic Studies and International Studies, held a convention, Project Atom 2024, and they have this Rear Admiral coming in from CENTCOM here to explain some things. Let's listen in to one piece of that.
Reconcile that with an idea of winning. So how do you think about that?
Yeah, so it's certainly a complex because we go down a lot of different avenues to talk about what is the condition of the United States in a post-nuclear exchange environment.
It's nothing. It's broken.
That is a place that's a place we'd like to avoid, right? And so,
absolutely.
So when we talk about non-nuclear and nuclear capabilities, we certainly don't want to have an exchange, right? I think everybody would agree if we have to have an exchange, then we want to do it in terms that are most acceptable to the United States. So it's terms that are most acceptable to the United States that puts us in a position to continue to lead the world, right? So we're largely viewed as the world leader.
Whoa, Bucky, Rear Admiral, back up here. He's like, well, obviously we don't want to get an exchange, but if we do, we want to have it be under terms that are acceptable to us. Pro tip, there are no acceptable terms for a nuclear exchange. I know you have all these fancy things, and I think you've got some secret weapons. You think you're going to be able to contain all this, but if all you have to do, let me give pro tip here, military guy, all you have to do is miss one nuclear sub, one Russian nuclear sub, and you have in excess of 100 independently targetable warheads that you've just missed that are now going to be coming for us, right? Oh, well, that's acceptable. We only lost 100 American cities and most of the people in them. Oh, well, our grid got completely messed and all of our oil facilities on the Gulf Coast were taken out. So, yeah, we're just going to have this mass starvation and dying. But, they had 98% death and we only had 92. This is insane. This is insane that we're having these conversations at all. And by the way, it shouldn't be this guy explaining, hey, here's how we do this militarily. By the time the missiles fly, it is a complete failure of diplomacy. And by the way, we do not have anybody right now in a diplomatic position on a par with the diplomats of the past. We've got some very unserious people with very, very fragile egos who are just not good diplomacy or negotiators. This is bad. And the military holding this stuff. Well, look at this. Here's some concerning language, too, from 528 of that video, which I've given you the link here, right down there. You can listen to the whole thing. It's 2 hours, 28 minutes long. But at minute 528, he says, well, that's our forces in the Air Force, Navy forces, the three legs of the triad, prepare for that potential eventuality. Potential and eventuality are kind of weird words to put together. But if we're talking about we're preparing for the eventuality of nuclear war, then we have to ask some other questions. If that's the case, then where are all our bomb shelters? Because Russia has bomb shelters. Russia practices putting its people in its bomb shelters. Russia is mass manufacturing portable bomb shelters. You know why? Because it cares about its people. Our military didn't even inform us that a ballistic missile had been fired in a hostile fashion. They're like, why would we bother informing U.S. citizens about that? Whatever. Afterthought, those people. Here's the point. With thinking like this, I can guarantee you one thing. You're on your own. Western North Carolina showed us and is still continuing to show us after Hurricane Helene, you are on your own. The communities are taking care of themselves. To whatever extent it's sort of doing something, FEMA is really not helping. In many cases, they are hindering because the U.S. government is not here to help U.S. citizens. Now, that has to change. I thought we voted against all of that and for a new regime, and we did. That's what the whole Trump vote was about. However, certain people are interested in making sure that we do not have a peaceful transfer of power. And since that election, we have seen multiple provocations of firing weaponry with lethal effect deep into Russia. And then just last night, this morning, my time, we saw Krasnodar get hit. And there's not a chance in the world that's because of a weapon system that was fired from Ukraine. And everybody knows that. Green light, green light, green light. Come on, folks. And by the way, this guy also is just putting out pure narrative bunkola, saying, well, acute threat, Russia's unprovoked war with Ukraine. Listen, you're not a serious military dude if you think, or even still publicly hew to that narrative. Obviously, it wasn't unprovoked. 14,000 dead Russian-speaking people over the 10 years from Minsk I and Minsk II speak to the idea that there were some provocations. I think you would agree that if some neighboring country came and fired missiles into your open air market where people were shopping that Saturday and killed a bunch of people and did that till 14,000 other deaths had happened, you'd be like a little provoked. I hope you would. Now, we've got this absolutely unserious character. This is our only diplomatic hope. And this guy has no interest in helping the United States in any way, shape, or form, as far as I can tell.
And I'm also pleased to announce that as we speak, the transfer of F-16 jets is underway, coming from Denmark, coming from the Netherlands. And those jets will be flying in the skies of Ukraine this summer to make sure that Ukraine can continue to effectively defend itself against.
Poke, poke, poke. Blinken is just absolutely one of the worst people out there. And by the way, who is actually making the decision to fire these long-range weapons into Russia, which is an act of war? Obviously, there's no resolution from Congress declaring an act of war. I don't know, because people ask the question all the time, who is really running the country? We know it's not Biden. We don't know what the chain of command is at this point in time. We don't actually know whose name is being signed out or who's crafting the papers that they forge Joe's signature on or fraudulently have a brain damaged president, sign a scrawly chicken scratch signature. We don't know who's running the country. We don't know who's making these decisions, but these are decisions that literally could bake our future. We deserve to know. So where's Congress on this? Where's the U.S. Senate on this? Nowhere. The new head of the U.S. Senate took his opportunity to come out of his cave, Thune, and issued a statement of how we have to do more to support Israel in its time of need. That's it. He doesn't care about the country, this country. He doesn't care about the possibility of a nuclear war outbreak. This is an astonishing thing, and that it's not being talked about in the press is everything you need to know. This is alarming, because when they don't talk about something, there's two sins that our U.S. media and Western media in general commit. Sins of commission, that's when they lie. Sins of omission, that's when they leave stuff out. They commit both sins all the time. Commission, omission. They lie about stuff and then they don't talk about stuff. Often, the really juicy stuff is in that negative space. What are they not talking about? Well, they're not talking about the fact that somebody in the United States and the UK has authorized long-range strikes into Russia. Don't forget, a number of months ago when we reported on it, that two critical Russian over-the-horizon radar installations were both damaged by Ukraine, right? Doubt it. Not you, at least Ukraine with a lot of help, maybe, but otherwise probably not even Ukraine. Those were damaged, and those actively create a worse situation because Russia is now a little bit partially blinded in terms of what's coming over the horizon. What's coming over the horizon? Those over-the-horizon radar installations are there principally to detect if there's nuclear missiles inbound or something like that, so that you can have time to adjust and react. Somebody wanted to poke Russia in the eyes and blind them so they would have less time to figure stuff out and potentially react. The more we do this, the higher the chance that we are going to have some sort of a miscalculation, some sort of an error, some sort of thing that tragically can't be unwound. So we don't know who's in charge. Nobody does. I mean, is it one of these people? We don't know. We don't know, but probably they went to Brown, they went to Princeton, they went to Yale. They've never run a business before. They have no idea how the real world actually works. And they're just out there making decisions that are going to affect all of us. So this is a time where I have to review. I've done this before, but let's pull this up. We just saw that Russia just overhauled its nuclear doctrine to include the idea that if it's attacked by a non-nuclear country, that's Ukraine, it will consider that as if it was being attacked by the country that supplied that country with its weapon systems. So it clearly updated its nuclear doctrine to include the idea that if attacked, it can respond with nuclear weapons against the country that it considers to be actively responsible for that. What did we do when we found out about that? That's when we authorized and struck deeper and with more regularity into Russia. So we're bringing the war, poke, poke, poke. Whoever these people are, they are not interested in a peaceful transfer of power. But it turns out that there was a Defense Department, a DoD document publicly discovered in 2005 that talked about the doctrine for joint nuclear operations. And it turns out the document was a draft being revised to be consistent with the Bush doctrine of preemptive attack. They're like, oh yeah, the preemptive attack thing, that was awesome, even though it turned out to be totally based on lies. That was the Bush doctrine. Oh, we have to attack Iraq before it attacks somebody with its weapons of mass destruction. We feel threatened. Preemptive attack. Obviously, that's a war crime, right? Bush is a war criminal, and so is Cheney and Tony Blair, everybody who participated in that fraud. Because when you attack somebody before they have a chance to attack you, that preemptive doctrine, it doesn't hold water, right? If you walk into a bar and shoot somebody and you say, well, I was worried he was going to shoot me, it doesn't hold water. It's not a legally viable stand to take. However, they now took the opportunity at the DoD to update the U.S. joint nuclear posture to be consistent with the doctrine of preemptive attack. And particularly the label joint refers to the fact it was endorsed by all 5 branches of the American military, as well as the U.S. Joint Chiefs of Staff. And so what is this new doctrine? Well, a doctrine cites 8 reasons now under which field commanders can ask for permission to use nuclear weapons. Like, oh, hey, I'd like to use some nukes. What's your reason? Let me check my list. It could be because an enemy is using or threatening to use WMD against the U.S. multinational or alliance forces or civilian populations. Get my pointer out here again. Problem is a WMD doesn't necessarily mean a nuke. A WMD got broadly redefined, just like the word terrorist got broadly redefined, right? Terrorist now includes somebody getting their voices up at a PTA meeting. So WMD is no longer meaning a nuclear device. It could be anything at this point in time. It could be to prevent an imminent biological attack. It could be to stop potentially overwhelming conventional enemy forces. Like, oh yeah, what's your reason? I'm afraid we looks like we chose poorly and we might lose this skirmish. Oh yeah, send the nukes in then, right? That's a terrible reason to use nukes because we're conventionally losing. Oh, then break out the nukes, right? It's awful. How about this one? It's now part of the new doctrine in the U.S. to rapidly end a war on terms favorable to the U.S. We could get this over with a lot quicker. Really? How so? I think if we just drop some nukes, this thing's over. We'll be greeted as liberators with flowers, I think. Do it, right? Terrible idea. Terrible. That's the Hiroshima doctrine right there. To ensure that U.S. and international operations are successful. Oh, there we go. There we go. Now, Russia has access to this stuff through. They're like, listen, we're watching these storm shadows coming in. We're watching. I've heard a rumor that potentially the United States has just authorized the use of Tomahawks, and we're going to give Tomahawk missiles, which can reach a lot further, also can be nuclear armed. So we're going to be sending these things that could be nuclear devices into Russia, who knows that we might just put nukes in there to assure that things are successful as we define them, right? This is horrifying. Just to let you know, this is bad because effectively it means nukes can be used for almost any reason at all. Like, we'd like it to be successful. We want things to go a little quicker. We're worried about losing. Those are terrible reasons to say, yeah, let's go. Let's go further. And so at any rate, you can read all that stuff. It's not good. Now, again, you're going to hear lots and lots of things as they start to demonize Russia about how Russia's, if they win in Ukraine, which by the way, Ukraine's losing badly, and a lot of money, U.S. money and NATO money has been thrown into that pit. And Russia's just consumed it all with superior battlefield tactics and munitions and radio frequency jamming and all the rest. So if we look at this, here is the size of the 5 largest NATO members versus Russia. Here's Russia, and you got the United States clocking in at about this big of GDP compared to Germany and United Kingdom, France, and Italy. So Russia, this little purpley thing is somehow going to be a threat to all of this, right? That's the story they want to tell. And again, it's really no contest. You look at the GDP on a purchasing power parity, that's PPP, NATO Europe compared to Russia, it's 25 trillion to 4.3. And the military expenditure is 281 billion compared to 65. Okay. That's just NATO Europe. Obviously, the United States is 880 billion, and I think it's 900 billion now. So at any rate, you're telling me that with a $1.5 trillion total combined spend, NATO couldn't take on Russia's 65 billion. Like, what happened? What happened? And then we look at China versus Russia versus NATO. China's got 2 million active personnel, Russia 850,000, NATO 5.4 million active personnel, 3,200 aircraft for China, 4,000 for Russia, 20,000 for NATO. So again, all this talk about NATO, oh, we're very worried Russia's going to take over Europe. Well, with what? You need materiel and you need personnel. NATO has them. Armored vehicles, no contest. Combined, China and Russia are about half what NATO has. Naval strength, again, combined, barely half, a little over half of what NATO has. Aircraft carriers, no contest. So when you look at the militaries compared to each other, it's pretty obvious that this idea that somehow NATO's existentially worried about Russia is junk. And by the way, why would Russia want to go attack Europe? It has more landmass per capita than any other nation on the planet and resources. Like what would it do if it went and took Paris? Like what would Russia do with Paris? Exactly. And then when you look at the proportion of public spending spent on defense proportion as a percentage basis, this brings us to the misleading use of statistics, because you'll see junk like this, And it's just, oh, look, Russia's spending 29% of its public spending on defense compared to just 11% of the U.S. But again, you have to look at actual expenditures, right? Russia is somehow beating the combined warehouses of NATO despite spending about 94% less. Okay? There it is. That's what we're seeing. United States, 828 billion, 324 compared to 65. It's not even any contest. So, by the way, Black in the Empire wrote here that NATO is shocked that placing 16,000 sanctions and spending 200 billion hasn't stopped Russia. You know what happened? NATO got used to finding a poor country with no real defenses, bombing the hell out of them, and then declaring themselves champions of democracy. Did not work out. All right. So what do? We have lots of excellent commentary back at Peak Prosperity. Again, if you're not a member there at a time like this, you're doing yourself a huge disservice, not least of which is come for my amazing analysis, but stick around for the even more amazing people that are there. Paper Made of Sand made an interesting comment down here, writing in from Norway, that they'd be flushing Norway's going to flush another 1 billion kroner down the Ukraine drain. Representative democracy, huge scam. Voter turnouts are lower, all that stuff. The fact is my government keeps prioritizing other people over its own at the detriment of its own people, and I'm sick and tired of it. Now, this was written before the U.S. elections. That's the same dynamic that drove the U.S. elections. The only upside I am noticing is that my nearby community seems to be getting stronger. People have been planting gardens with vegetables for many years now, and I think we can all smell the ashes while the media keeps performing cognitive warfare on the tragic few that keep listening to them. Are you listening, New York Times? Because that's what you're doing, too. Most of us common folk don't seem to anymore, but at some point, we also have to collectively figure out a way to ensure a future where this does not happen again. And for that, the ruling class must go. And that's why it's so dangerous right now. They are malignant narcissists. They would much rather burn the world down to rule over ashes than give up even a tiny smidge of their perceived power. That's who we're dealing with right now. They will burn it all down. So that's why, hey, I'm here to help. We've got an incredible series of articles back at Peak Prosperity. I'll take you through what my personal preparations are for nuclear war. Yes, I think there are things you can do to survive. I plan to survive no matter what happens. If I don't, hey, that's how it worked out. But there are things that we can do, and I think you need to be aware of those. So if you are one of those people who's thinking, yeah, I'd like to give it a shot, just in case, you would want to come and read this, and I give you, of course, background framing knowledge you need. So I am very good at explaining complex problems and predicaments and issues to people who aren't technically minded in that way. So one of the things I do here is talking about the big difference between radiation, nuclear radiation, and nuclear contamination. You got to know the difference, okay? And so the contamination threat is the thing we have to actually survive. That's the hard part in a nuclear war. The radiation, I think, is quite survivable. Now, also in our forums at Peak Prosperity, it's pure signal. I just took this screenshot. What are we discussing? Well, Bitcoin, Ukraine striking Russia again. What's going on in Germany? The EU and the Tower of Babel. If you don't know about that, you probably should, especially if you're in the EU. And then, of course, Ukraine used ATACMS last night. That's a big thread about what's going on. And we're back to first principles. And, of course, you see, just for fun, the unserious side. We have a lot of incredibly strong signal in there. You're going to need to know what's going on. And not the least of which is this has been an alert. This is an official alert. An alert, again, is something, it's a piece of information that has caused me and Evie to take action. So I'm going to talk about what those actions are. You can figure it out. Just get prepared. You know, if you're a do-it-yourselfer, go and get prepared. But if you want to have some guidance and would like to know what to do, you can come on by. I think, listen, if we can make it to Inauguration Day in 2025, that'll be a miracle. It's T-minus 59 days. We got to make it for 59 more days. And at this rate, with daily provocations and weapon strikes in Russia, hey, who even knows how this is going to shake out? So if you want to be prepared, and you should be, come on by Peak Prosperity. And for anybody who is a Peak Prosperity subscriber, come on back. This is an alert. let's get talking. If you have that tunnel vision, because this all seems very alarming, it is, but that's okay. Take a deep breath. We'll get through the next steps together and we'll work it all out. So for everybody else, God bless. Take care. Get yourself prepared.